This is episode 30 of the Ownstream podcast, featuring Patrick Haize.
Welcome to the Ownstream podcast. So happy you're with us. I'm Teresa Scoba.
And I'm Stephen Shelley.
And we just hung up with Patrick Haize, and what a really, really interesting, vibrant conversation we had. We got introduced to Patrick through Bridget Nielsen, who was one of our earlier episodes. I can't remember maybe one of the teens of our episodes. And we'd also watched independently. We'd watched a couple of Patrick's videos on YouTube. He has a lot of videos on YouTube. It's one of his primary platforms for the message he's trying to get out, as he talks about in this interview. And I think it was specifically around the Matrix and mind control and programming, something to that effect. And we definitely knew that this is somebody who is really conscious of kind of the messaging of the mainstream, the power of that, and has worked to get himself out of that and is helping other people to do that too.
And there's a lot of subtlety to that too. I think when you introduce the idea of Matrix, you say it, and it just conjures up all kinds of images for people, and you immediately might have a reaction. I think really hear him out, because he has a very thoughtful, intelligent, and it just rings very true view of that. And it really kind of comes down to kind of a Gaia or earth-based matrix or a synthetic one, which is more man-made. Those are my words somewhat, but the matrix that he tries to align to and helps others align to is the more natural Gaia-based matrix. And his take on how you do that and why that's so powerful and is very elegant. It's very simple. It's very elegant, and I think he really be sure to listen to that, particularly if you felt triggered by that statement, because his view of it, the picture that he paints of that, I think is very sophisticated and rings very, very true.
Yeah, and even the examples when we asked him kind of to talk about what are some ways that you felt programmed by your experiences with what he's called the synthetic matrix, I think, and he has very accessible examples that I think a lot of people relate to about early experiences watching television, how that formed his motivations and relationships. And Stephen and I reflect back on ways that we still feel fondly about McDonald's, even though we're heavy plant eaters. So it's interesting and it is provocative, and I think really could make you think and just look at some of the ways that you think and act, and where did the belief system come from? Where does that understanding of the world come from? And question that. And I definitely found myself doing that during this conversation.
We also talk in depth about addiction. He has a history with that, and kind of what his experience was and how that shifted for him. And I think along with that, we talk about how when he was younger, some early medications that were applied to him and that kind of influenced him, and that he now can look back on beyond that and comment on Adderall and comment on opiates and his eventual heroin addiction. He can comment on those things with some intelligence and really kind of bringing forward a paradigm of viewing that might be different, which I thought was very interesting. And the last thing that completely threw me for a loop was we always ask our guests at the end, what book or books do you think every person should read? And he said a couple that were very interesting, things that we had not had mentioned on the podcast. And then he mentioned somebody that I knew 12, 13 years ago from the whole pickup artist scene. I don't know if you know that about me, but that's well in my rearview mirror, but certainly something that I was involved in back in like 2003, 2004. One of the leaders in that world at the time. I guess he's still a leader in that world. I don't pay too much attention to it. But anyway, Patrick talked about him and how powerful his ideas are and the work that he's doing now, and which I thought was fascinating and surprising, to say the least. One little technical thing we'll mention before we turn it over to the interview is, so this interview is coming out on, what is the date? August 4th or 3rd? August 3rd. So we're going to go for the month of August, as you probably know, and for a period of time here, we're going to be doing what we call repatterning, which means we're going to be living in our Sprinter van for a period of time, traveling and just kind of following our nose and our excitement.
Being in nature.
And being in nature, which is a big theme in this conversation, in fact. So we're going to be doing that for the month of August. So that submission, if you will, to the Gaia and the Matrix has caused us to do two things business-wise, which you should be aware of, which is we're going to go every other week with the podcast in August. We'll see how that goes. We may continue that. We may go back to weekly in September. We hope you'll stay with us. We hope you'll stay committed to our message and what we're doing. So that's number one. So we're going to, in order to fulfill that greater mission, which we think that this time period is designed to do, we will be going every other week with the podcast. And our monthly tip-off emails, we will stop doing for the month of August. We will pick those back up again, we think, in September. If and when that plan changes, if we're not going to pick up the podcast and the tip-off weekly in September, then we'll let you know. But for now, just know that in August we'll be very quiet. There will be an episode coming out on the 3rd and on the 17th, and then probably 2 Thursdays after that. I don't know if that's August 31st or September 1st. I guess it's August 31st. I don't know how many days are in August. It doesn't matter.
30 days has September. No, 31.
31. Okay, so then August 31st. Okay. So anyway, that's a little bit about our logistics. We hope you'll stay with us. But anyway, sit back and relax. Enjoy this conversation with Patrick. He's one of these, he's a younger man who has a very powerful teaching and message coming through. He explains why he thinks people in their late 20s and early 30s now are emerging as leaders in this kind of consciousness and spiritual movement, something we've noticed. Very interesting. So enjoy this conversation with Patrick, and we'll be back afterwards with a quick wrap-up. Well, yeah, let's just dive on in. Patrick, welcome to the Ownstream podcast. Thanks a ton for being with us, and yeah,
it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
And are you now on the East Coast?
We are now in the Berkshires in Massachusetts.
Wow.
We just hosted a retreat out here. Yeah, have you ever been to this area before?
We have
many times. Yeah, we lived in New York for a long time, so we're East Coasters. But I know that
for a number of years.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Teresa grew up out here, but I'm
live in
actually
California
from
now.
The East Coast. Yeah, we live in Southern California, but we thought it'd be kind of interesting for you to talk about the as just a way to start, kind of what this adventure was on the East Coast, who was there, and kind of what it's all about, and then we can kind of go from there. And also be sure to mention kind of why East Coast is unfamiliar to you guys in terms of your events and stuff. Because Bridget, when we spoke to her back a few months ago, she was kind of excited for that, because I think this may have been your first event on the East Coast.
This is the first event. It's been a little bit, and I'll get into what the event was in a second. I'll answer the second question first, but sure. It's been a little bit, we haven't really been drawn to the East Coast until recently. What actually brought us out here was my cousin was getting married in Washington, D.C., and so we decided we're going to go on a road trip and hit all these different cool spots, but we wanted to do something in the East Coast while we were out here. And Gabe Solomon, I don't know if you know Gabe Solomon.
Heard the name, yeah. We don't know him.
So he's a friend of ours. He lived with us in Sedona for a while, and he has 30 acres out here in the Berkshires, and he's a real cosmic ET young star kid. And so we decided we'd go ahead and do a retreat with him here on his land, and it was amazing. It was called the ET Earth and Adventure, and it was really, about connecting to the cosmic roots, but also really connecting to the Earth and grounding in our mission. Because a lot of the whole starseed movement is great, and it's very enlightening. But I feel like one of the areas that it needs a little bit more focus right about now is how to ground all of these, downloads back in and make it a part of our practical life. So that was a big thread that ran through it also.
How do these events function exactly? Because this is something we were going to ask later, but it seems to be ripe right now, which is, you have these events where you go and you sit in a room and you listen and you exchange. But I have a hunch that your events are different than that. How does this work? What's the logistics, if you will?
Yeah, well, our events, we're really, we like to be out in nature. We are really adamant about connecting with what I call the Gaian program. And as we move on forward, I'll talk maybe a little bit about I was saying the synthetic matrix versus the organic matrix. So, so getting involved and getting connected to Earth, our true roots here on the planet. So all of our adventures are always, we call them adventures because they're nature adventures. We go swimming with dolphins. We go hiking on, through the Sedona Red Rocks. And here we were, on this 30 acres here, we're sitting right here on a lake, and, everyone was camping outside, and we had fires every night, and we were playing drums around the fire. And so it was really about kind of getting back to that indigenous, like tribal earthen roots. And that's kind of, so when you talk about a curriculum, our curriculum surrounds, getting out in nature and being in the trees. So, like for instance, one of the things that I did was I was having people, write out their goals and how they were going to ground a lot of the things that came through during the trip. And then we went out and tied these little ribbons to trees to ground our intentions back into the earth. So it's really, how do we co-create with the planet? And so our retreats are about that, getting out in nature and connecting and remembering who we are, dancing to that rhythm.
Cool. And I know I want to pick back up the thread. I know you didn't get a chance to answer why the East Coast is unusual.
Yeah, well, what I think it was is that there's, and it's funny because I've been studying a bit of the geomancy. I have a lot of friends out here that are deep into that whole thing. And the culture, while it's still relatively young, in the Americas in general, as far as, European culture receded here. A lot of the ley land points and sacred points have been built up so long ago, and there's these huge cities surrounding them. I mean, we just got back from Philadelphia last night, and Philadelphia was the original Washington, D.C. And meaning they found the special ley lines so that they can build all of their structures around them and then intensify their rituals or their intentions. The same way kind of the indigenous did before, but when the Europeans came, they started building all sorts of geometric structures along these lines. And originally it was supposed to be Philadelphia. It was supposed to be Washington, D.C. But apparently one of the architects, or the main architect, was kind of like an anarchist, and he wasn't in with the whole, domination agenda that they were working with. And so he intentionally built the location several degrees off. And so then all the intentions and all the rituals weren't working. And when they found that out, they had to move it all to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And the reason why I brought that up is because I feel like, it felt in the West Coast, it seems like, so much had been, it just seems it's less dense, as you guys probably know.
Yes.
It's less dense on the West Coast. There's a little bit, there's lighter gridding, and it feels a little bit more free for, downloads or different intentions to arise and manifest. And so we just hadn't really felt the draw so much back to the East Coast. But having come through, I actually recognize how much sacred land there is out here, and have a tremendous respect for the people that are out here holding it down, because it's a denser energy to work with. So, but yeah, I think we just haven't really been drawn out because it's been more, we've been focusing more on the places that we live and where we get inspiration. And for us, I think we're just, I would say like we're more new world seeders than old world, destroyers.
Right.
I could say it more like that. So we want to kind of bring the new world. While it's just as valid, and there's many people that are kind of like busting old systems. But I think out here is a little bit more like busting the old system down. You run into a little bit more, controversy out here.
Right, right. Well, we're going to circle back a little bit to definitely the work that you do and the work you're doing in nature and the grounding, the intentions that are coming through right now. We definitely want to get back to that. But I know we want to start a little bit by talking about your story. And we know that you experienced a shift in 2009. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what was going on for you then, what your life was like, and what happened.
Wow, yeah, 2009. That was a major shifting point for my life. That was a point when I kind of broke into a more free artistic environment. And what I mean by that is that before that, my reality and the people I was surrounded by were very heavily, influenced by just mainstream society. It was very kind of on lockdown. In 2009 was when I started embarking on, I basically opened up and made new friends, got back into the psychedelic revolution and started really like exploring my artistic expression and connecting with people that were a lot more open. And I realized then how thirsty I was for transcendent experience, not only transcendent experience, but alternative information. And so 2009 was a major breaking point for me. And, not long after that, I had a very powerful awakening experience. And this might be what you were kind of zeroing in on, where I was visited by what I like to call at this point, like a future version of myself. And it came to me, and just to make a long story short, it showed me a lot of things about my place of origin, and showed me different symbols that were correlated with kind of like a cosmic name, and different sounds that were correlated with it, and then kind of gave me like an energetic upgrade that was, in a sense, temporary, but it was more like a template seeding where afterwards I kind of went back to my old self, but knew that there was something else possible. I had experienced something greater. And since then, it's kind of just been unpacking that. And I'm still, in a sense, unpacking it. But I feel like I'm really coming into more of a stabilized expression of that.
How does something like that occur? Or at least in your experience, how did it occur? This visitation?
Well, I was laying down, and it was like a psychic merger. So it was, it wasn't like, ETs came flying into the room like in a ship or anything, but it was very, I guess you could say I was kind of in a trance state, though it wasn't intentionally induced. It was just kind of like I was really, really calm. And then all of a sudden I was interacting with this other consciousness. And I came to put together later that it was me. I was basically coming, in a sense, back through time to communicate with myself. But it was highly visual. If you could imagine like a really, really vivid daydream that basically took over your consciousness in the moment. And it was beyond just the visuals of a daydream, but it was, tangibly palpable. It came inside of me and started doing all these little micro kind of qigong movements, and then flooding my body with a bunch of energy. So it was, it almost looked like I was doing like micro pop and lock. It was like, like, and my body was kind of like moving, and then all of a sudden, all this energy would just flood through my body. And my ego mind would start questioning, like, what's going on here? Like, what is this? I remember tangibly, this other version of myself kind of took that picture of my ego into like a head, and then kind of stuffed the mouth closed and pushed it back out of the field of view. So it was like, we're not letting this monkey mind come back in here. Like, we're working with you right now.
Wow.
And so I just sat back and let it move through me, and it changed my life.
And so when something like that occurs, you come out of that state. What do you do with that? What is how do you did you the intelligence and clarity with which you speak about it now, I imagine, has been honed a bit over at least the linear timeline.
Right.
But in the moment, are you just kind of, is your breath taken away? And are you able to, does that experience come with, if you will, instructions for how to, what's the word I'm looking for? Integrate
it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
I wouldn't say that there were direct instructions, but it was more, for me, it was like an energetic, it gave me a preview. So it showed me a destination point of what I could get to, but it didn't tell me how I could get there. It just kind of showed me like, this is what you are. And the integration process was definitely, that was the crucible for me, because it was like, a lot of the time it was like banging my head against the wall. Like, I just experienced this thing and I know it's me, but now I'm back in this kind of limited space and I don't know how I'm supposed to get back, but I know I can now and I know what to shoot for. So that's what it did for me. It gave me a context of what I'm capable of, but it was like, but you have to do it on your own. So it didn't come with directions, but in a sense it gave me direction, because then I knew where I was going.
I'll say one last thing, and then Teresa has a question. But I think of the Native Americans and many other kind of cultures that predate the the European/white man invasion of the earth would use psychedelics in a similar way. They would introduce them in a very controlled way, such that the young warrior, or the young person in this case, could receive a kind of a mapping point to orient towards, if you will, that would guide them in a certain way that would help them kind of evolve in a spiritual way that I guess was aligned to that culture. And it sounds like that was kind of like perhaps what occurred for you as well. It became a bit of like a north was set on your compass that now began to guide you probably more deliberately.
Yeah, I definitely see a strong correlation between the two, though I feel like, the indigenous had really, in many ways, when the lineage is unbroken, have perfected this art maybe to a better degree of how to induce this kind of experience on command when a soul is ready. But yeah, I feel like it's in a sense, it's like a shamanic awakening. You could say it like that. It was a shamanic awakening. And that maybe would be the terminology that would correlate most directly with the indigenous' experience of it. But I definitely agree. Yeah, it's very similar.
So when you had this experience, you were at least enmeshed in, like, with the people you were surrounded by, sort of a mainstream lifestyle.
Right.
And so after you had this, I know you talk a lot about the matrix and deprogramming. Were you, with this kind of awakening, did you kind of step out into your life a new person, or was there a process of deprogramming that needed to take place, and what was that like for you?
So yes and no. I stepped out as a new person, in the sense that I now I had a vision of what I'm capable of. But I was still, other than that, I was pretty much where I was at, right, before I got out of it. I just kind of had direction now, and I had felt what it was like. And so then I guess, in a sense, my physiology had been primed, because I did feel the energy. So I had that, I had now experienced higher vibratory state coursing through me. So in a sense, like, I guess my template had been changed, but I kind of just had to work it out from where I was at to start moving towards this. And like I said, I'm still unpacking it.
Yeah.
And the process has been intense, and deprogramming is a great way of describing it. And that's kind of what I've been using more recently. As I've noticed that a lot of powerful younger people and older people are really coming into the awakening process through the lens of conspiracy and kind of like mind control, and this seems to be the angle a lot of people are coming into their awakening process. And so in understanding that language, I've decided to speak about what I say to another crowd would say is self-empowerment or self-realization. I'm now terming, matrix deprogramming. But really, they're kind of the same thing. It's just, I'm speaking to a particular audience when I say deprogramming.
And so what is in your in how you work and in your own experience, what is the Matrix? Because many people have seen the film The Matrix, which paints it a certain way, but I'm interested in how you paint that idea.
Well, actually very similar to the movie. But the way I've been liking to describe it recently is that a matrix is neutral. It's not, like a control matrix necessarily. There's different kinds of matrices, right? So there's what I would call the organic matrix. I think it was Seven Bomar that coined these terms, the organic and synthetic matrix. So the organic matrix is, like Mother Gaia. And that's, it's a stabilized holographic, reality that, if perfectly in balance, is infinite. And what connects people in the matrix, and this is a lot of the work that I've just recently been doing with the matrix deprogramming, is first understanding the organic matrix and then understanding what the synthetic matrix is and how it's kind of acted like a malware to infect the organic matrix. And so if we look at the Gaian matrix, or what I say like the Gaian program, it's a web of interconnection that connects all of the beings that are within it. But what connects all the beings are the four elements. So air and wind, water, fire, and earth. So we breathe the air. So we're breathing in a sense, you could look at it like a program. The best way of looking at this is like with water. If we've studied Dr. Emoto or many of the other doctors and scientists that have now studied water and concluded that it absorbs information and holds information, much like a crystal or a disk that holds a program, you can program your water. And depending on how your water is programmed, it is structured completely different and has a different effect on your consciousness. So if we take water, say, that is running through a river, it's moving in spirals, and it's being charged by all the rocks around it. And if you're to measure the water, that's clean water coming out of a spring or in a river, it's going to have the Gaian program encoded in it. And it's the same way with the air, and it's the same way with the earth, and it's the same way with the plasma. So and what I mean by plasma is that's the fire. So sun and fire. So the Gaian program runs through all of these things. And in a healthy world, we're eating food. So we have earth from the food that we're eating. We're breathing the air. So we're breathing in the Gaian program through the air. We're drinking the water. And then since ancient times, we've been sitting around a fire looking at fire, which is the plasma. And then sun gazing, and so that's the sun element, and so this is the fire element, and we're absorbing the Gaian program. Now the Gaian program is created to evolve a being. This is what helps us evolve out of what I consider this planetary sphere as being like the womb. This is like the mother's womb, and that's Mother Earth. And as we're nourished by the Gaian program, it helps to stimulate and catalyze our greater awakening and moving beyond this, say, childhood stage of consciousness. So this is the Gaian program. And the synthetic matrix is a matrix that has been infiltrated with like what I would call malware. And malware has been basically implanted into all of these different elements. So obviously, air pollution is easy to see. There's air pollution going on. There's water pollution, pumping everything through 90-degree pipes, taking the Gaian programming out of the water. There is in the food it has pesticides. I mean, I'm sure you know that this is old news now. There's so much junk in the food. And then the plasma. So we used to sit around a fire, which cleans the aura and connects us to the plasma field. We used to sun gaze. This doesn't happen anymore, but what's replaced our attraction towards iridescence is now blinking lights on computer screens and cell phones. And through the fire element, or the infiltration of the fire element, is where, because what I was all speaking about before, in a sense, is biological malware. This is what has kind of infiltrated the biology. Then the psychological malware comes in through that fire element, where we start getting programmed by televisions. I mean, you used to sit around the fire and people would tell stories and connect. Then it was replaced by the radio, and then it became replaced by the television, and then that's when it started controlling thinking. Whereas before it was the stories. And if you think about the web, so the Gaian matrix this is what connects all beings. When you breathe in and then you breathe out, you're kind of putting your stamp on the air that you breathe out. And then that gets circulated and other people breathe it in and breathe it out. Same thing with the water. Same thing with the food. You breathe, it goes back into the earth. And this is what creates the web and connects all things on a real physiological level. And so that's the Gaian matrix. And when it's been infiltrated with toxins and things that are unnatural, I mean, yes, you could say everything's natural, and it is, but not everything's natural to ingest in the way that we're ingesting it now. This is where what I call malware. And this malware has infected the people and taken us off of the Gaian program. So our natural course of evolution has been disrupted. And this is what I call programming. This is it's like a malware program that has infected the Gaian program.
And so for people who might not realize they're programmed, we all kind of generally know or know in an intellectual way that television programs us, right? Like when you had this experience and you realized that you were programmed, maybe you could talk about some of the specific ways you've seen that you were programmed and ways that you've been trying to deprogram.
Well, the most one of the big aha moments for me was I re-experienced a moment that I had once experienced as a small child at an older age. And so I was able to see it through kind of two lenses. I saw it through the lens that I was when I was a child, and I saw it again through a more, hindsight's 20/20 refined lens of older age. And what I experienced was that there was a commercial that I was watching as a child, and I was so young at this point, I hadn't quite developed a full sense of sovereign identity. And what I remember happening was there was a red car driving out on a beautiful road, and there was a guy with a pretty girl, on this road, and there was music playing, and it was really invigorating. So to my young self, I was taken in by the emotion that was created, artistically created through this commercial. And I remember when I was a child, I created this, there was an allure in it, and I made this kind of association of that is me, or that is what I am or want to be. And there's not really specific language to describe the agreement that I made, but on a level, it was I felt so attracted to it that I decided to connect with it on a deep level and make that that experience or that connection with that feeling and emotion that was created. I decided to make kind of an agreement with it that's part of me now, or that's what I'm searching for, or this is something that I am now really attracted to. And I realized when I had re-experienced that that's what advertisement is doing. And that's to children at an extremely young age, this is what it's doing. And so in a sense, we make one term for it would be a soul agreement. It's we're doing this at an age where we don't have an awareness of clear language or boundaries. And when something is woven that deep into our psychology or it's deep into our emotional body before we have the psychology to really clearly discern what's happening, it can create what would be called courting, energetic courting to these different companies or whatever the advertisement is, these different associations. And this can keep us, if we're not aware of it, it can keep us connected on an energetic level to these things for the rest of our lives. So that's definitely one way programming happens. Another great example of how programming happens is, all, children have a natural tendency towards sweet foods. But this is, in a healthy environment, this is a natural tendency towards fruit. And so we would go out and we would go, try to eat strawberries, or, pick the berries that we come across, walking in the woods. And that sweet flavor and attraction to sweet flavor is a survival instinct. But what has happened is industry has come along knowing that there's this inclination towards sweet food, and they've swapped it out with something that is synthetic and so sweet that it contorts the taste buds so that a child is no longer attracted to what's naturally sweet, but they're only attracted to something that's, super sugary and refined and sweet. And so, kids are eating Gerber baby food, and Gerber baby food has all this, sugar in it. Yeah. And so they don't develop the subtlety in their palate to appreciate raw vegetables. And then you wonder why no kid will eat vegetables. Mm-hmm. It's because since the time that they were born, they've been getting fed stuff that has conditioned their taste buds in a certain way that makes it robs them of their subtle palate abilities, and they're no longer attracted to that. So this is how a program is infiltrated in, and then you become addicted to these different foods that literally start affecting your consciousness in a negative way.
Yeah. It's funny. I haven't had McDonald's in a very long time. But when I grew up in the 70s, we ate McDonald's a lot. And I'm telling you, we'll sometimes drive by McDonald's and I get this warm feeling in my body. Yeah. And every once in a while we'll stop to use the restroom. Maybe we'll get some water there, but we don't, or coffee, but we don't eat the food. And I'll go in there and I'll smell the McDonald's, and it will bring back this strange recall of warmth and, this is such a happy place to be. Meanwhile, knowing what I know, which is that's some of the most toxic food on the planet.
Oh, yeah, and we're like whole food, plant-based, have been for a while. We have not eaten McDonald's in so long. We both talk about that's so nice. Just earlier today, Stephen, we passed a Chuck E. Cheese, and Stephen said, gosh, I'd really go for Chuck E. Cheese.
That's so funny. I know, it's funny, right? Well, it's, these industries have billions of dollars that they're throwing at creating the most cutting edge technologies to coerce people and use the most what's the word, the most sensually captivating agendas that they can. And they have billions of dollars to do stuff that really, when it's looked at clearly, it's like black magic. Because it's using, it reminds me, it just reminded me, the colognes that put the pheromones in it. Yeah. It's the same kind of thing. They're putting chemicals out there that literally activate your, the mechanism in your body that creates hunger and salivation. So it's like, they're using very advanced scientific techniques to evoke these kind of connections. So, it's definitely something that we all have to, the good part about it is it helps us to really become aware of ourselves on a deeper level to overcome that. Because, how would I say this? If we don't really come into awareness of what our true self is, then our sensual desires will just whip us around forever. So actually transcending that and saying, when you're talking about I'm feeling this feeling, but I know that that's not truly me. Coming to that space is a major transformation for a lot of people, to really know who they are enough to not get kind of strung around by their senses.
Well, you use an interesting phrase there, being strung around by your senses. I know you have an interesting part of your life from the past related to addiction. We wanted to be sure to cover that because I think there's some interesting content in there. Would you mind sharing about kind of in a brief way, your history with that? I think there was some prescription drugs when you were very young that kind of led you into some heavier things, and what happened there and how that changed for you.
Yeah, definitely. So I was put on Adderall when I was about 12 years old. And I was speaking earlier of synthetic matrix. Big Pharma is probably one of the number one producers of biological malware through the form of pharmacology.
Yeah.
And so essentially it's synthetic drugs that create a frequency bandwidth response in your body that invites in all sorts of, negative attention and opens portals for feeding for other beings on different dimensions. And I don't want to get all like crazy into that, but that's essentially what's happening. Yeah. So when I was 11 or 12 years old, I was depressed and non-functional in school because I just didn't really know how to respond to the world, and I was extremely sensitive. So I was, I basically had walled myself off and kind of given up in many ways. And so I was going to different doctors. My parents were sending me to different doctors, and I think it's still a pretty big thing, the ADD, ADHD thing. And that's what I got labeled with, and they gave me the, Adderall, right? Which is basically like crystal meth. That's what it's like. So I started taking Adderall, and, even to my consciousness at the time, it was like, it was great. It felt great because all of a sudden I was just extremely euphoric. It can give you dopamine 6 times the normal dopamine boost that you would have from like eating a meal or like, going on a run. So you can imagine you're like 6 times more euphoric than you've ever been in your life. And so from that space, like, math problems, like dealing with this teacher, like all this stuff was fun. And I spent from about 12 years old till about 19 years old, taking Adderall, being prescribed Adderall and taking it just to function because I wasn't functional for that. And so what that kind of did to me is that, at age 19, when my body started rejecting the Adderall, because I couldn't sleep or eat, that's what it does. I stopped being able to take it, and I started just getting more anxiety. I wasn't really able to function, so it wasn't working for me anymore. My physiology was rejecting it, and so I tried to go without it, and I just couldn't function. I was back into that 11-year-old's the funk that I was in before I started taking it. And around that time was when I started finding my way to opiate painkillers. And that basically took over. It was like the next step. It was something I could do because I could sleep and I could eat while taking opiates. And I could function also because it gave me that emotional stability and inspiration to move forward in the world. And then I spent the next 7 or 8 years, unsuccessfully trying to quit and going, I would go on for, anywhere from 3 months to a year and a half. I would be on opiates on a daily basis. And then I would finally figure out how to quit for a while. And I would quit I don't think I really quit for more than a month. In that whole period until I quit for 1 year when I was about 26 years old. And I was doing a lot of different drugs at that time, but I was able to actually quit the opiates for about a year. And then I went back into it. And then I spiraled down really hard. I ended up, I was homeless in Mexico. I went to an Ibogaine clinic and finally made it out of that whirlwind. It's been about almost 6 years now since I've made it back. But yeah, I had a deep relationship with addiction from a young age, and so that's something I actually work in right now. I help counsel drug addicts, and help them kind of step through and click through to the next level of their life.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about that funk, like you talked about being a kid and not feeling like you got it in terms of school or, feeling depressed, and that, as you were kind of cycling in and out of using drugs, that would come back and you didn't really know how to deal with it. And then you got out. So I'm curious, you've talked about like, the true self. You talked about, how the synthetic matrix interrupts our natural evolution. Like maybe you could talk a little bit about what you think, what was actually going on there that got labeled ADHD And then, what was your solution to coming out of it ultimately?
Well, what it was is that I was an extremely sensitive and emotional child, and I think most people are, some more than others. I was extremely sensitive myself, and I had family that just wasn't emotionally available. They meant well and they wanted to be helpful, but they had their own stuff going on, and they weren't available for me, so I couldn't really express myself in that way. And I had no philosophical foundation of what was going on or how to even create a frame of just a framing around life that could support me in expressing myself and being who I am.
Yeah.
So I just, since I couldn't really get any positive feedback from the world, I just kind of cut myself off from the world. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, the funk that I was in. What ultimately gave me the possibility to come out of that funk, that is, even while I was using drugs, this is when I started studying a lot of esoteric wisdom and self-help, to build some sort of philosophical basis that then became my safety net once I got clean. But what I was able to realize, and this was really through the internet and all of the new information that started being made available, is I stumbled across some different teachings online that just really resonated with me and gave me the opportunity to admit and recognize who I really am and what I've been trying to do, gave me the language to communicate that, and then gave me the inspiration to move forward and know that there's other people that have been through similar things, and that there's a way out. There's a way of perceiving this world and framing this world that can be extremely empowering. And slowly but surely, I was able to build a foundation that empowered me to do that. And then when I was able to step away from the drugs and alcohol, I had something to stand on. And in a nutshell, that's basically the process I went through.
What were those teachings that really inspired you? Just curious.
So, there was a lot of different things, but, off the top of my head, Tony Robbins was actually extremely helpful for me. Bashar was extremely helpful for me. What is the name? Who are Hicks, Esther Hicks. Extremely inspired me. These were some of the few things I was seeing. Some of the Pleiadian channels were really inspiring me, and I had a really, especially in the beginning, I had a really strong connection to the ET content, and that's why Bashar was so inspiring to me. I had a lot of experiences in the astral realm with different extraterrestrial experiences, a lot that was induced from the opiates, because morphine, which comes from Morpheus, which is the god of dreams, has a really uncanny ability to strengthen your astral travel abilities. Now, I'm careful when I say that, because I'm not at all trying to endorse opiates, because it's not the kind of astral travel you want to embark on. It's all lower astral realm. Mm-hmm. It's nothing transcendent and divine, but it did give me the ability to step out of my body pretty easily and then traverse these different realms. And in those realms, I had a lot of encounters with different extraterrestrial phenomenon. And from that, I was really inspired a lot by the Bashar work, and a lot of his work was very pivotal in my life.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about, what your calling, what your purpose is now. We know that you've thrown yourself into work that serves others. Can you tell us a little bit about what you would say your calling is and how this manifests in your life?
Well, generally, it's just to do what excites me the most, that helps other people. And how that's been playing out recently is I've really found myself I mean, music is really my passion. It always has been. I'm a hip hop MC, and I started off listening to gangster rap when I was a youngster, and now it's, you know, transcendent, philosophical, in a sense, kind of like self-help, feel-good hip hop that I make, and so I've been doing a lot of that. I have an EP that's about to release with a buddy Itom of mine, and so I've really been pushing hard on the music. And that's definitely one really strong path that I'm pursuing and really excited about. Another path is the drug counseling or addiction counseling, and that's something that just naturally, you know, I've lived that, I've been there, and I've, you know, made it out, and it's kind of like second nature. I have the ability to kind of really to really get in there with somebody that's been in deep, dark places, and that, you know, and I know how to describe to addicts a lot of things that they've experienced but haven't quite made sense of yet, and to clarify things and clarify the kinds of questions that can help them find direction in their life. So working on that, working with drug addicts is another avenue. I love making YouTube videos. It's kind of like a way of grounding new philosophies and new ideas in for me. So, you know, I've really been excited for the time when I can give more time to my YouTube channel, but I've been making quite a few YouTube videos over the last year. And then we do these retreats. So we go to different power spots on the planet and inspire people to live their dreams and to get connected with nature. And so I'd say those are, you know, the four primary angles, you know, and then I'm doing this Matrix Deprogramming course too. So that's that'll be an e-course with a bunch of videos in it that speaks more specifically about the nature of, you know, the Gaian program versus the synthetic matrix, and how to deprogram from that, and how to recognize many of the different social and psychological programs that are rampant amongst media and amongst society, and how to have the proper, say, like kung fu block for those programs, and how to, in a sense, kind of like it's like an anti-wear system, like install a firewall around your consciousness and your physiology.
What's the timing, or your anticipated timing around that?
So that it's been an interesting thing. Different things I would say probably about 5 or 6 months I should have the project together. Mm-hmm. And it's you know, we're on the road now, so I haven't been making so many videos. But I'm going to be grounding in here to Colorado in the next about 3 or 4 weeks, and I'm going to have a good about 6-week period there where I can dedicate it fully to my music and fully to these programs and these videos.
Well, I know that you do work with people around, as you said, many things. I'm curious, one thing I've noticed is that there's often a transition point for people away from what we could call a mainstream life into something more authentic to them. And oftentimes it's kind of bridged by an awakening of a type of service that they feel particularly called to give. We call it a calling, but other people call it purpose or mission. I'm wondering, are there ways that you help people unpack that for themselves, understand that with some clarity for themselves? I know you've got some videos about that topic, which I thought were really interesting, but are there ways that you work with people, or any kind of advice you could give now to somebody who might be kind of yearning for some clarity around that?
Definitely. Yeah, that's a big thing right now. It's like, living a 3D life, doing a job that we hate, for some corporations that's destroying the world. And then we start, waking up to different things and feeling out and realizing that there's so much more to life, and there's so much, there's so many better things that I could be putting my life force into. And then there's this stage of kind of like the double life where, one part of you is like, watching YouTube videos at night and getting inspired. And then the next morning it's like you're back, flipping burgers or doing whatever, the thing that you hate to do. And then how do you create that bridge to the other side? And, the first thing is really finding, well, what is that thing? What is that gift that you have to give the world? And because once that inspiration and that vision is clear, then it's just a matter of courage to jump off the cliff. But the courage will never come unless there's a vision, though, because, you know, that's what creates the courage, is seeing like there's something else I know I'm supposed to do. And now I'm ready to go do it. So when I work with people, the simplest series of questions, or simplest question I can ask them that can help bring more clarity to what is the goal, what is the mission, what is the gift that we have to give the world, is this. It's, if you could do anything, if you could do absolutely anything, and you knew that you would be fully financially supported and fully safe doing this thing. You also knew that you were going to be loved, supported, and valued by community while doing this thing. And you also knew that whatever this thing that you decided to do, you would be successful at it. What would that thing be? What would you do then if all three of those things were taken care of? And the reason why I say it like this is because what I've noticed is that the three areas that block people from seeing what their true passion is in life is these three scars that most people receive in this world on their three lower chakra centers. And that's feeling unsafe, whether that's financially or whether that's like just physically or emotionally unsafe, feeling unsafe. That's feeling unloved or unvaluable. And it's feeling disempowered. And those are, you know, directly associated with the three lower chakras. But when those three things are in place, if we grew up in a society where we just grew up feeling safe, we never had this feeling of danger that we needed to make money to survive. If we knew that that no matter what we did, we had a tribe of people around us that loved us and that saw the value in us and that supported us. And we knew that we were capable, that we were empowered, and that when we put our mind to something that we would succeed at it, then we wouldn't be chasing these things, and we would know what we felt inspired to do would be our mission. But many of us find ourselves chasing one of these three, or several of these three, or all three of these three levels of stability. So we're either chasing safety by running out, you know, working a job so that we can make sure we survive, or, you know, worrying about how to place ourselves in an environment that's safe so that we're not going to be attacked or, you know, verbally abused by people, or we're trying to be valuable. Like we don't feel valuable, so we're, you know, maybe pretending that we're someone else so that we're accepted, so we can feel valuable and part of a group. Or we don't feel empowered, so we're trying to impose our reality on other people, or demonstrate some sort of power in oftentimes perverted ways to get some sort of sense of empowerment. And many people spend their whole lives chasing these things because deep down beneath there's a wound. They don't feel like as if they're safe or empowered or accepted by people. And so if you can really truly go inside and ask yourself, if all those things were really taken care of, what would I do then? That's when it tunes you into what your gift is, or what you're really here to do. And when those three foundations aren't created, then it's hard to kind of, you know, figure out who we are. But we can get glimpses of it by just simply meditating on that, meditating on what it feels like to be safe, what it feels like to be loved, and what it feels like to be empowered. And we can really get into that, you know, psycho-emotional state of feeling those three things, and then ask ourselves, okay, well, what would I want to do now? That's when you start hinting towards that mission or that gift that you have to share with the world.
So good. You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about the adventures. You know, we talked a little bit about that, the adventures that you guys are leading right now. And you said something about how, you know, a lot of messages are coming through. You know, maybe it's related to this, you know, in terms of what people's gifts are, how they're supposed to serve the world. And that, you know, I'm curious about, you know, how the adventures go, how important it is, why it's so important to connect to nature to bring that message through. And then you also mentioned at the beginning about grounding that to move it forward in the world. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I'll just go right into the importance of nature. The reason why nature is so important is because, and like I was getting into the Gaian program earlier, is because there's a rhythm to nature, and that is our true nature and our true human rhythm. And there's a term called harmonic resonance. The best way I like to describe it is that if you have two acoustic guitars in a room, and you pluck one string on one of the guitars, the other guitar that string will start ringing also, because there's a harmonic resonance, and that sound wave moves through the air and starts vibrating the other guitar with the same resonance. And this is a great metaphor for how energy dynamics work. So this is, when you walk into a room and there's bad vibes, you feel the bad vibes, and your body starts reacting to those bad vibes. Well, it's true in our lives. Everywhere we go, our environments are emitting different frequencies. And in cities filled with 90-degree angles, in concrete, being inside boxes, like houses that are built in square shapes, all of these things have resonances that are not harmonious with a healthy biology and physiology, and then result in an unhealthy thought process and just level of consciousness or just awareness. But nature is, in a sense, the antidote to that, because nature is our natural resonance. This is what we came from, and it's really ultimately what we're made of. So when we can get out into nature, I always joke with people, like, if, for anybody that spent like a full day like out at waterfalls and knows what it feels like when you're walking back to the car from having like spent the whole day like swimming through waterfalls and having fun, that feeling right there, if you could roll that feeling into a joint, and somebody could smoke a joint and within 30 seconds go from their everyday mentality to that feeling, that would sell just as much as any other drug on the market. But the thing is that it's gradual, and it requires people to go out into nature, and it takes all day to really kick in. But that feeling is our natural state. And so when we get out into nature and we start connecting with it, you'll see all of these unhealthy thought formations and negative feelings that they just dissolve off of us. And so it's so important to get into nature, because it gives us the foundation to change the way we think, to change the way we perceive reality, and then therefore bring through those higher realizations, like what I was speaking about earlier, like what we're here to do. To do that practice that I mentioned in nature, it's going to be 10 times more potent, because you have the whole biosphere supporting you in it. This is what nature wants you to do. Nature wants us to be in tune with it, because then we protect nature. We become part of the system. So when we start, spending time in nature, it's actively working with us to help heal the contortions in our energy field, and to help inspire us to be an extension of nature, or i.e. our true selves, and then become a harmonious member of the Gaian expression.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered all the aspects.
Yeah, no, it's great. It opens up all kinds of other possibilities, but one thing I've noticed, and I don't know your exact age, but so many people kind of around the age of 30, or maybe just a little younger, or just a little older, seem to be, at least from my vantage point, the kinds of messengers that I'm interested in, that I think Teresa and I are interested in, that I notice a lot of people are interested in, that there's this kind of generation. We don't need to label it anything, but there is this kind of generation of people who have entered, that have a certain power or clarity, or maybe they're just less distracted or polluted, for lack of a better word, by elements that were maybe very strong in the 20, 30 years ago. I'm wondering if you've noticed the same thing, if you have a view on that at all, how, one thing we talk about is this kind of new earth, and which seems to be forming in pockets here and there all around the world, that my impression of it is that it kind of will grow out from the middle, eventually just sort of overwhelming all these old systems that don't really serve the matrix that you just described, the Gaian programming. Is this something that you've noticed or talked about, or that's registered to you in any way?
Yeah, definitely. I think that what you're speaking to is every generation has their own gift to bring, and I think that there's a potent gift that's coming from the generation that you're speaking of that I'm in, right? So it's like later 20s, mid to late 20s, some mid, but mostly later 20s to mid 30s, and I think that what that's coming from is that there was this particular generation is the intermediary between the older generation and the younger generation. And we've come to an age where we've had enough life experience that we can start speaking with truths that we've been and actually truly been through. And we've also developed the language to articulate what has happened. Whereas, when I was in my early 20s, I had no language to really express what was going on. And I think that's a place that a lot of the youngsters are at too, is they're still learning how to express what's going on. So it's not quite their time yet in a lot of ways. And there's always, phenoms and guru, like what you saw, like whiz kids that come through. But I think there's a sweet spot right now for people that are in their late 20s and early 30s, in which we're really creating a healthy bridge between the younger generation and the older generation. So we can speak in a more of a psychological terminology that is satisfying philosophically for the older generation, but we can still also bring through these higher vibratory experiences that a lot of the younger kids are experiencing, and kind of be the bridge to bring the generations together. And this point in time right now is for that age group. I think it's a really important time in which we're, in a sense, kind of paving the way for the youngsters to be able to understand what they're going through, and then to be able to step in a place where they're going to be able to express the new things and the new gifts that they have as they're kind of stepping into their fruiting stage.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, we're certainly a lot of, we're trying to replace our synthetic matrix with a lot of positive programming and things that resonate, and a lot of that is coming from people that are in that age band right now. So it's really working for us, and it's really resonating. So I know that we're kind of running to the end of our time. We have a few questions we ask at the end of every conversation. I think we'll ask now. So the first is, what book or books up to 3 would you recommend that every person should read?
Oh, that's a good one. What book or books? Oh, there's so many good books. Well, it's interesting that everyone should read. See, I would recommend different things to different people. For somebody that's something I'll just say what I've been liking recently, or things that have been consistent for a long period of time for me. I love Rudolf Steiner's work. I don't know if you know who Rudolf Steiner is, if you're familiar with him, but he was a German mystic that wrote a lot of really detailed spiritual guidelines and just he documented the spiritual realm in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. And for somebody that's highly intellectual and that's interested in spirituality, Rudolf Steiner is a great read for that. So for somebody that's highly intellectual, I would check out Rudolf Steiner. And actually, there's a guy who went through and read all of his books onto tape and put it up on YouTube. And that's a great way to listen to it too, because this stuff can be kind of difficult to read. But if you listen to Rudolf Steiner with all the vocal inflections put in the proper place, it's definitely more intelligible and easier to move through. So I would say anything that Rudolf Steiner has written is extremely powerful. And that would be more, so for an intellectual type. For somebody that's more of a feeler, I've just recently read the book called Kunlun, and it's by a guy named Max Christensen, and it's essentially what he calls this practice, and it's basically telling a spiritual practice. It's kind of like it's called Neigong, so it's similar to Qigong, but it's the path of no more learning. So it's really about how to get in touch with your body through different postures, and just kind of let source flow through you, and not have to figure so much out with your mind, and just kind of learn how to trust your intuition and flow with that. So for somebody that's definitely more emotional and not so heady, I would say that the Kunlun, this Kunlun by Max Christensen, that would be a great book for them. And I'm trying to think, as far as like somebody that's very action based, that really wants to do something, that go out and do something. A book doesn't come to mind. And but who comes to mind, funny enough, and I know that you've studied some of this stuff, is a guy named Owen Cook. And now a lot of the work that he's been doing is in like the pickup industry. So it has a lot to do with like dating and for giving men confidence again to go speak to women and be involved with women. But Owen Cook, I'm not sure if he's written a book, but his videos are very action based. And I really appreciate his work for that, because it's like, what are you doing today? Go out and do this. Go out and, try these different techniques to actually go into the world and take action. And so he's got some really good, it's taboo, it's risque, and it's not everybody's thing. But if you can get past the context in which he's delivering it, where it has a tinge of kind of chauvinistic, if people might take it that way. But if you get to the root of what he's really bringing across, he has some really, and apply it in a context where it's not strictly about dating, but apply it in a context of true social dynamics. He has some really, really powerful action-based information.
Have you met him, by the way? Have you connected with Owen? Because I know him, actually. It's amazing that you just raised his name. I mean, maybe you looked at my bio, or I don't know, but I was like, no. Whoa, I know who that is.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Well, I saw something on your bio that you that you work in the dating industry, or you help people with dating and like connecting with. Right. So I assumed that you would know who he was because of that. Yeah. But I didn't know that you knew him personally. No.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, now you're interviewing me, so we won't do that for very long. But
no, go ahead.
I was. Many, many moons ago, a pickup artist, and was his wingman for a long time out in L.A. And
no way.
We were in The Game, Neil Strauss's book, The Game, all that stuff together.
Oh, right.
Although he was a much more central character, if you will, in that book than was I. But nevertheless, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've kind of, from a very great distance, because I've distanced myself from the world of pickup mostly, right. Kind of noted that he has evolved considerably, but I haven't checked out his videos, at least the more recent ones, so I will do that. That's pretty amazing. Yeah, I had seen something recently. I think he's branching off to do a lot of different kind of self-help that's not so much surrounding pickup. Yeah. And so that's really cool that he's going that direction, because he's so articulate, and he really brings things across very holistically. So I really like listening to him, and he's very action-based, and I like that about him. Yeah, very action-based.
Yeah,
cool. Well,
that's so cool. I didn't know that. That's so funny.
That is a wild turn. Some of our listeners, by the way, are maybe people who have followed me from that period of time.
Cool.
And so if they're listening, maybe they want to chime in. Not obviously audible, but through posting on the blog or something. If you're listening to this and you have videos that you think people should look at, by all means, post them in the comments from Owen or anybody, really. But that's amazing.
That's cool. That's cool. That's synchronistic.
Yeah,
it comes off, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Well, Patrick, before we let you go, why don't you... We have
the other two questions.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
You threw Stephen off because he just went into another reality. The second question is, what thing, item, or keepsake have you held on to the longest, and why?
Thing, item, or keepsake have I held on to the longest?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is going to sound like a lame thing, but my computer... I honestly, and the reason why I even just said it like that was that it seems like about every year I just shed everything.
Yeah.
I go through all the stuff. I read this book called The Art of Tidying, And it's like, so I go through everything that I have. I feel it. I ask if this thing brings me joy or not. Does it bring me happiness? And if it doesn't, I just throw it out. So, so if it was one item, you know what? Actually, that's a lie. It would be my books.
Mm.
That's one thing I do hold on to. I hold on to all my books.
About how many books?
I have several hundred.
Mm.
I mean, I have like a huge book, collection, but I have several hundred in a bin in Sedona right now. It's like sitting under the house, and it was hard to even be able to keep that much there because we were moving out and the house is going to be remodeled. Bridget's dad's remodeling it, and it was like we didn't want to take up too much space. I'm like, no, I'm holding on to the books. I'm throwing everything out. I'm holding on to the books though. So I would say my books. I feel like you never know what's going to happen. The internet could disappear tomorrow. You never know what could happen. So I feel like the books is, that my library is super important to me.
Yeah, cool. Last question. What have you learned in the last 30 days that you think every person should know?
In the last 30 days.
Give or take if it's a little longer.
Right.
Just most recently. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'll say what I've learned is like, you know how with any of these universal truths that there's always a deeper level to them. And in the last few months, I've come to a much deeper level to the truth of, getting out of my own way and getting out of my mind and just being in the moment and being able to just trust my body awareness. And, so, I mean, it's not like a very specific or explicit explanation of like this particular truth, but rather that there's so much in the body awareness. The use of my intellectual mind has been like on turbo overdrive for so long. And the more I have these experiences where I'm actually using my mind appropriately, in a sense, like letting my heart, or in many ways my body and my body intuition guide me, and let that go first, and then let my mind kind of just supplement that, it's invaluable, what comes from that. So the ability to detach from unnecessary thinking and let the intuitive body be the leader.
It's great. We definitely are practicing a lot of that ourselves. So before we let you go, where should people connect with you online, and what would you like folks to know about anything coming up for you?
Well, you can connect with me online at patrickhaize.com. So it's Patrick, Patrick, Haize, Haize.com. That's my website. My YouTube is youtube.com/Patrick Haize Live. So LIVE at the end of Patrick Haize. And what I have coming up is I have an album with my partner iTom Lab. We have an album called Aura Quencher. The name of our group is Golden Triangle, and it's finished. It's going to be released here, I'd say, in the next month or so. And so you can just look out for that on my website. And the name of the group is Golden Triangle again. And we're speaking with a couple labels. We're not sure exactly how we're going to release it. We might go independent, but that's coming out here soon. I have a music video for a song, Soul's Recognition, that I'm going to release on 8/8, so on Lionsgate of next month. And that's a super inspirational music video. It's kind of like what would I say? It's like my, it surmises a large majority of my life's realizations and evolutionary philosophies into one particular song that's extremely empowering and inspiring. And that's coming out here, like I said, on 8/8. So I'm going to be releasing that on my YouTube channel. And then my Matrix Deprogramming courses are going to be available somewhere in the next, 4 to 6 months. So you can stay tuned on my website for that too.
Great.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Well, thanks, Patrick. So grateful to you for your time. This has been really wonderful chatting with you. Really, really amazing stuff.
Yeah. Stephen and Teresa, thank you guys so much. It was amazing connecting with you. And I love the space you hold, and I love what you guys are doing. So yeah, let's definitely stay in touch. And I'd love to connect with you guys when when we're in the same vicinity. So yeah, we'll keep you posted on where we are, and I'd love to cross paths sometime soon.
Yeah, us too. Thanks, Patrick.
All right, that's it for this week's Ownstream podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this amazing interview with Patrick Haize. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode for links to everything mentioned, including Patrick's website, his music, all the books, videos, and other resources we discussed, and more. All of that can be found at ownstream.co/Patrick Haize. That's ownstream.co/PatrickHaize.
Also, please find us online at ownstream.co and on Facebook at facebook.com/Ownstream, and be the first to know about new podcast episodes, new blog content, and cool stuff related to our personal journey. Also, we're on Twitter at Ownstream and on Instagram, where we post regularly at own_stream. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Ownstream podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.